In Diablo 2, unlike most action RPGs, many of the most powerful items are items you can create yourself, rather than find solely through random chance. Today we're going to take a look at the items you can do this for off, or more precisely, on the top of your head, as is the case with Helmet Runewords. While helmets sadly don't get the best reputation in Runewords, they do have some pretty strong options if you know how to use them. Since there are so few of these, it is pretty easy to rank them though, so we'll start at the worst and work up to the best. At the bottom of the list for Runeword helms, we have the helmet that is oddly popular but also fairly garbage outside of a niche use for some limited speedrun tech with Cloak of Shadows, and that is Nader. For Nef and Tier, you get 9 charges of Cloak of Shadows, a pinch of defense, 5 strength, 2 mana per kill, the only gold fine penalty source in the game, and that's about it. The Cloak of Shadows charges are kind of nice for juking past enemies, but they're expensive to repair, so the long-term value is low, and the reality is, for anything outside of speedrunning, I'd much rather have 2 tiers in the helmet, or even use a rare with some resists. Second from the bottom would be a helmet with a bit more reasonable use case, and that is Radiance, which I usually think of as the lawful good cousin of Nader's lawful evil. For Nef, Soul, and Ith, you get a bit more defense than Nader, an okay boost to vitality, energy, and mana, and a bit of both types of damage reduction and some damage to mana gain conversion. Due to being 3-socket and an entry-level helmet, I have only ever bothered making this in class-specific helmets on solo self-found playthroughs where I didn't find a good 2-socket helmet for the class. While not terrible, it still doesn't come close to the other 3 options of helmets, but it is by far the cheapest and most reasonable of the 3-socket helmet runewords if you're in a pinch. In the middle of the pack is probably the runeword helmet you'll hear me mention most often, because it's cheap, strong, and super reliable, and that is Lore. For nothing more than an Ort and Soul, you get +1 all skills, an energy bump, a good amount of lightning resist, some damage reduction, and mana per kill. While it will never be best in slot in the postgame, this helmet is extremely powerful for the cost, easy to farm, and will often be a helmet you can use through the End of Hell difficulty if you want. I usually end up making one of these on almost every solo self-found run I do, especially if I find a decent class-specific helmet, so while I get a lot of these just throughout playing the game, and a lot get sold at the end, I still have a ton of them stored away. These last 2 can be argued about which is better or worse because they're both pretty awesome, albeit somewhat expensive. But I'm going to give second place to Dream. Reason being, for one, despite being extremely strong, I really only ever use it as a helmet for Sorceress and Paladin builds, and the other reason being it's super expensive, costing Io, Jaw, and Pole runes. On the surface it sounds okay, with good stats like resist, magic find, mana, life, hit recovery, and defense, and even has a good reactionary confuse when struck and a holy shock aura, but doesn't really stand out for anything special beyond that until you realize that auras do benefit from synergies and masteries, which is why this is used as the endgame goal of builds like Holy Shock Auradin, known as a Tesladin, and the Dream Sorceress, also known as the Tesla Source, since they both can ramp up the damage Dream gear gives. This is further amplified with how auras stack while equipped, and in the case of running Dream Helmet and Shield together, these buffs apply to a whopping level 30 Holy Shock instead of just the level 15 from a single piece of equipment. That leaves our number 1 slot to Delirium, which will likely irk some people, but it's fine. This helmet is made with Lem, Ist, and Io, which is the mid-price range for runewords and is best reserved for ranged characters, outside of specific exceptions. This helmet is the only runeword that gives 2 all skills, which makes it good for casters, and makeshift 5 NATO helmets are not out of the question, and it pairs this with some otherwise mediocre stats, some magic find, gold find, vitality, and defense. It even has a penalty of causing delirium shapeshift when hit sometimes, which is why this will irk some people that it's in first. But it shines because of its most important one, confuse on striking. This one effect makes it significantly improve survivability of most range attack builds, especially the Strafer Amazon. This means that it is good enough for magic builds, even though it's not best in slot by any means, and it makes it competitive for best in slot for a number of range attack builds, especially things like the Strafe Zon. So, do you agree with my rankings or do you disagree? Feel free to put your thoughts down below.